your formula chart, because you need your formula chart. We have additional information. By the way, a lot of you sucked at Pythagorean theorem, I want to say. Okay, that'll be a topic that we shouldn't have to go over, but we will be going over. All right, because that one y'all did really well on the assessment. Okay, and then we gave it to you and you all forgot. Maybe it was just the way they asked the questions. Is that the problem? Maybe. I don't know. But simple interest, compound interest. If you notice, there are two different formulas. Simple interest is basically used like when you take a car loan or a student loan. Most savings accounts are simple interest. Compound interest is a more complicated formula, and it's used for more of in banking, in accounts. There are certain types of like IRAs and different types of interest that you can make. And compound interest, you never want to take a loan with a compound interest, because if it compounds daily, you could be in big trouble. All right, weekly, monthly, you would be in big trouble, because that means it's just every day. Okay, so you want that interest rate to be simple. You want it in simple interest if you ever have to borrow any money. A home loan is simple interest. All right, it may come out to be a lot of money because you're borrowing a lot of money, but it is. So we are using the simple interest formula today. Tomorrow we're going to compound. And interest is the amount of money charged for borrowing or using money, let's say. That's an easy way to say borrowing money. But if you, and examples of that are car loan, a house loan, a savings account. Most simple savings accounts give you simple interest, student loan. So you're not necessarily always paying the interest. If it's a savings account, the bank is paying you interest to use your money, because they do. You put $100 in a savings account, they take their 100,000 customers and take all of their savings accounts, and they're out there investing. That's how they can afford to give a home loan, because when they give a home loan, the bank has to have the money to loan for that, because they got to pay whoever it is that owns the home. So your money is being used, and your bank pays you interest to use your money if it's in their bank. But it's not very much. Savings accounts pay very, very little interest. It's not very much at all. Okay? So your formula is I equals PRT. Okay? And we need to know the different parts of this. So when you solve this formula, you're solving for the amount of interest. In other words, if you borrow $100, you're going to pay a certain amount above and beyond that $100 in order to borrow it. That is what interest is. Okay? So I is your interest. How much it's going to cost you to borrow that money. You buy a $25,000 car, you're probably going to pay about, if you're lucky, you'll get away with paying about $30,000 for that car in the end. Okay? I one time went to go get a car loan. This is back when I was younger. They wanted me to pay on a $23,000 car, they wanted me to end up paying $32,000 in the end. Because they only talk about how much you'll pay per month. They don't want you to say, no, how much is my interest rate? How much am I going to be paying? And you sit there with a calculator figuring it out, and you say, oh, Lord, I'm not paying you $32,000 for a $23,000 car. Okay? So, you know, that's just the way car dealers are. They're going to ask you, well, how much can you afford a month? That's the first thing out of their mouth. Always. I'm not talking about how much I can afford a month. How much are you going to sell me this car for? Okay? bottom line, how much are you going to sell me this car for? And they give you a price, and you say, okay, what's my interest rate? And then you figure it out for yourself. Okay? All right, P is principal. Principal is the amount of money that you're buying. It's also known borrowing. It's also known as the initial amount. It is the amount of money you are borrowing. Okay? That can be, gosh, simple house around here, $250,000. You got to figure you're going to pay to borrow $250,000. You're going to have to pay somebody something to use their money for 30 years. Okay? Because it'll take you 30 years to pay that $250,000 back. Okay? You live here and you buy a house, it's really hard. Most places, if you buy a house, you get some equity and you can turn and sell it. For instance, principal on my first home I bought in California was $150,000. Okay? 10 years later, the principal, or the money I sold that house for, was $499,000. So I made equity. You take $500,000 and subtract $150,000. I made $350,000 in principal. Okay, you can't do that here in Center, Texas. You can't do that in California too much anymore, but you can make some equity. In Center, Texas, you're just lucky to hold on to the sales price why I say that is because there's not people. This is not a mover and shaker. People move in here, and they're like, where you don't have a lot of property available because you have so many people trying to move here. Okay, that's what drives the home prices up. All right, whereas Center, we're kind of, we don't have big industries to bring people here, and businesses and that kind of thing where you do when you live closer to urban areas. All right, rate. This is your rate. It's always a percent. Okay. They always give it to you in a percent. You must convert the rate percent to a decimal. Okay. Do we remember there's two ways? One way is you use Dr. Pepper. Do you remember that? When it's a percent, you move it 2 times to the left. If it's a percent, you're going to move your decimal point 2 times. Okay? 2 times to the left. The other way is whatever your percent is, you take that, and you have to take the percent sign away regardless. You take your rate and you divide it by 100. Okay? Those are the 2 ways you can change and manipulate a percent into a decimal. Now, the thing you have to be careful about is sometimes you're given something like 4.25% as a rate. If you're given 4.25%, if I just write it as 4.25, that is not a decimal. I drop the percent sign, and then I still have to either divide by 100 or move this 2 times to the left, and I end up, this would equal 0.0425. That would be my decimal. Okay? Sometimes I think it's just easier to remember divide by 100. It's just so easy. Divide by 100, no matter what it is. Divide by 100. You'll get the correct number. Okay? The last thing we need to know is the T in this formula. So it's I equals P times R times T. When you have letters next to each other in a formula, it means you're multiplying those letters. All right? So T is time. And that time, Princess, look down here in this box underneath my desk. And you can pull it up and look for your test. Time must be always in years when you are calculating interest. All right? Now, sometimes you'll pay interest for 6 months. So you have to convert those months into years. And the way you do that is you take the number of months, how many months are there in a year, and divide it by 12 every time. Okay? So if you need to know, or you could also, because you have a calculator that does it very easily, let's say I had 6 months. Okay? There's 2 ways I can convert that to years. I can do 6 divided by 12, right? And I would get 0.5 in your calculator. Or you could simply use it as this and put parentheses around it when you're multiplying and do 6 times, you would do times 6/12. Okay? That would be your T. It's up to you how you want to do that, but you have to do it. Okay? All right. So let's try converting. 18 months is equal to how many years? Well, 18 divided by 12 gives you what? 1.5, doesn't it? Okay. Victor, what's 3 months in years? How much is that? 3 months. How much is that in years? What? .25. So that is the number you would use. Here's the key. Because the first thing you don't write them down, just mark them wrong. Okay? Sorry. Distracted me for a second. Alright? So it's .25. Anybody do the next one yet?
5 years.
Okay, so you would take 60 divided by 12, and that would equal 5 years. All right, so we've talked about this formula. It says equals I. So when you do this formula, you are actually solving for the amount of interest you're going to have to pay to borrow that money at this rate and this amount of time. But sometimes they want to know what is the total repay, okay? How much is it going to cost you total? Total balance, okay? Or sometimes they call that ending balance, okay? So what will be the ending balance on the loan, okay? That is how much you're going to have to the total amount you're going to have to repay. And to do that, first, find the interest, okay? Next, you are going to add interest, which is your I, plus your principal, which is your P, and that will give you what we would call account balance or ending balance. There's different ways that they'll say that. If they do not indicate what type of interest it is simple interest. In order for them to want you to use compound, that formula, they will state compound, but it's not always stated simple when it's simple. So if they don't tell you compound, you need to automatically use simple. Let's turn the page. Let's try a couple practice problems. You get a student loan from New Mexico Education Assistance Foundation to pay your educational expenses this year. Find the interest on the loan. So they want to know interest on the loan borrowed. You borrow, all right, so we've got P, R, and T. Okay? Because we know our formula is I equals P times R times T. Okay? So your principal is $2,000. Your interest rate is 8%. How am I going to write that as a decimal? 0.08. You either move it twice or you divide by 100, okay? And it's for 1 year. So that's my time. It's in years, so we're good to go. So now it's just a matter of putting it 2,000 times 0.08 times 1. And what do I get when I do that? Everybody got it? You should practice, because if you practice when we're doing these problems, then it'll just come and you won't have to think about it when you go to do your own. Okay? If you sit there and just copy everybody's answer, then that's when you get in trouble. Okay? So we get that equals how much? I believe it's $160. So I equals $160. Everybody got 160? Okay, so remember, we're looking for principal, rate, time. Our formula is I equals P times R times T. Okay, so you borrow how much? 10,000. Leave those commas off. I hate commas. Why do I hate commas? Because they get confused for decimal points too many times. From the bank at 4.8%. So if I take 4.8, drop the percent key, I'm either going to divide that by 100, or I'm going to move that decimal point 2 times. 1, 2. And some people get confused with that, so sometimes it's just easier to divide by 100. So you get 0.048, and our time is 5 years. So I've got $10,000 times 0.048 times 5 years, and that equals what? So I equals 2,400. Remember I said earlier, what would be the account balance to this loan? What would you do? You take your interest, which is, oh gosh, I wrote 24,000. It's 2,400, and you add it to the 10,000. So if you had to find out how much you have to repay that person for borrowing the 10,000, you would be repaying $12,400. Okay. All right, you are tired at the end of your term and decide to borrow $500 to go on a trip to whatever land. I like that. You go to the bank and borrow the money at 11% for 2 years. So I equals P times R times T. What's my P? $500. Times what's my R? 11%. I have one of two ways I can do that. 11 divided by 100, or move your decimal 2 times. And you get what? 0.11, don't you? Okay. 0.11 times how many years? 2 years. What do I get? 110. So I equals 110. So I'm going to pay $110 extra besides the 500 that I already borrowed. Okay? How much will you have to pay the bank at the end of 2 years? So now they want to know how much in the end are you going to have to do. So you're going to take your principal, add it to your interest, and you get account balance. Or how much in the end you're going to have to pay back. So you've got 500 you originally borrowed, plus the 110 you have to pay in interest. So you're going to pay $610 back. Okay? Number 4, find the interest on a loan of $2,500 that is borrowed at 9% for 7 months. So I equals PRT. I've got, let's see, P is 2,500. That's pretty straightforward. I've got an R of 9%. So that's going to come out to how much? 0.09. And then time is 7 months. What am I going to have to do with that 7 months? So 7 divided by 12 gives me what? What? 0.58. So if I do this, unless this question's not going to be open-ended, but if I do this with 0.58, I'm going to get close enough to pick out a multiple choice. Do you agree? Otherwise, I would definitely do times, put parentheses around 7 divided by 12, okay? Because I want to make sure that I get the exact amount. So 0.58, and what am I going to get? $130.5 is really 50 cents, right? When we're talking money, we want to write it like money. So then it says, how much would it cost to repay the loan on 4A? So that's one of those principals plus interest equals account balance, or account ending balance, I guess is a better way to put it. $2,500 plus $130.50 gives me $2,630.50. Do you have any questions? Okay, so we're going to do the practice. Like I said, there's only 10 problems.